ladies and gentlemen, to the Worshipful Mayor of St Edmundsbury, Councillor Tim Marks, to the Town Mayor of Haverhill, Councillor Pat Hanlon, to Sir Eldon Griffiths, our former Member of Parliament, to the attending members of St Edmundsbury and Haverhill Town Councils, and of course to the rest of our audience here this evening, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Haverhill Arts Centre and to the premiere of the Haverhillmanalive documentary about our town. My name is Adrian Graves. Also at the front here are Ron and Linda Walker, who were and have been throughout, and indeed remain, the real driving force behind the Haverhillmanalive project. And Gary Pontin and David Hart, who have become essential members of the team during that process. Matthew Hancock, our new Member of Parliament, sadly cannot be with us this evening, but he has sent us a short message, which I am pleased to share with you now.
Haverhill is a town on the up. It's a great place to represent in Parliament because there's a strong sense of community and people come together and help each other and we work together to solve the town's problems. And so I hope that this video and this film will show that Haverhill is a town that's going places.
Thank you, Matthew. Let me briefly put this evening into context. In the early 60s, a number of East Anglian towns, including Haverhill, signed up to become London overspill towns. Schemes under which significant shifts in population would occur as the then LCC, London County Council, sought to overcome overcrowding and dereliction in London by encouraging people to relocate to the countryside. Haverhill, the town in which some of us here were born and bred, including me, was a sleepy market town of 4,000 plus people, with one primary employer, Gurteen's, followed by Addis's brush factory. All that changed with the arrival of first 10,000, and then 15,000, and then 18,000 people, an influx which would change the town forever. In 1968, the BBC chose to make an episode of its Man Alive series about Haverhill. It was the beginning of the BBC's now matured docudrama skill of hypercritical reporting, which effectively knocks down and destroys anything with weaknesses or that faces challenge. The programme was almost completely negative and basically damaged brand Haverhill's reputation for decades to come. 2 years ago, Ron Walker was helping a local school to renovate a copy that had been found of the original Man Alive programme. And during the course of this work, he became so incensed about the unfair criticism of the town in the original programme that he determined to put the records straight. He contacted the BBC about making a programme to show how Haverhill has turned itself round and become successful. He didn't even get a reply. So Ron, along with Linda and Gary, and supported by David Hart, set out themselves to make the amateur film that you are about to see, to demonstrate that far from being a failure, Haverhill remains strong, vibrant, thriving, positive, dynamic, and looking towards its future. It has many of the attributes of other similar towns, and quite a few that are unique, beneficial, characterful, and stand it in good stead for that future. Coincidentally, but not planned, this new documentary is concurrent with the consultation and planning processes for St Edmundsbury's Vision 2031 strategy, which will see Haverhill expand again and grow from its current 23,000 population to something over 30,000. That is going to see a whole new level of change, and based on its past performance, Haverhill will seize that opportunity just as it has seized its role as pioneers in town expansion in the 60s. However, The lessons of the past must be recognised and integrated into the plans of that future. Quite deliberately, we are going to show you the two programmes back to back. The original 1968 Manalive programme first, and then the new documentary immediately thereafter. I invite you to share the sentiments and emotions at the end of the first programme, which incensed Ron and the team enough to produce the Repost and set the record straight once and for all. After the two programmes have finished, we will be delighted to invite Sir Eldon Griffiths to the microphone to make some comments. Sir Eldon, as you will see, is featured in both the original programme and in the sequel. Now, please watch the programme and please form your own opinions. Thank you.
John Coster, Herbert Darking, Albert Farrant, Percy Geraghty, Eric Graves, Robert Green, Clifford Poole, Reginald Poole, Monday the 24th of September 1951.
Those were the men, that was the date. That was the building that stood on the site, where the most momentous decision ever taken for Haverhill was made.
That decision was to join the London County Council Town Expansion Programme, a decision that would change the town and the lives of everyone in it, utterly and forever.
Back in the 1950s, Haverhill was dying. Its population of 4,000 was shrinking and there was virtually no incoming investment. So some of the town councillors took the decision to expand Haverhill by going for growth through town expansion.
This was to be part of the largest piece of social engineering ever undertaken, with Haverhill taking potentially 30,000 of those involved. The plan promised much for the Londoners who signed up for it: a new home, new job, new life in a rural setting.
Reality, however, proved to be much less than had been promised or hoped for. Haverhill's experience was one of much disappointment, for many anger and resentment for some of the locals, inadequate new business to provide enough jobs, poor services and infrastructure.
Haverhill's plight had reached such depths that it became a matter of national news, prompting the BBC to come and make a documentary about the expansion programme and its apparent failure.
It was this programme, with its bleak view of the future, which was broadcast to the nation in December 1968. Today you will see just how wrong they were, and how the people of Haverhill rose above the failings and problems and have created the busy, successful place we have today.
We will now begin by showing you the original programme, followed by Sir Eldon Griffiths, our MP in 1968, Chris Gurteen, son of Bill Gurteen, who plays a major role in the original programme, and finally Adrian Graves, son of Reverend Graves, a passionate advocate of the town expansion. They will share their views on the early days of our expansion. Following this, we will fast forward 42 years and Gary will guide you on our Repost.
50 miles from London, Haverhill greets the visitor with self-advertisement these days. Doomed since the horse and cart went out of fashion to the slow decay of many country towns, Haverhill achieved importance overnight when it became a pioneer development, designed specifically to provide new houses and jobs for several thousand Londoners, described in planners' jargon as overspill. Overspill's a word that lacks warmth or dignity, and so, according to the people living here, does this expanding town. Not long ago, these new houses were toys on a planner's table. If those who rent them today had any say, this picture would be very different. But it's too late to make any changes now, say the planners, to Londoners who don't enjoy living in houses built close enough together to squeeze in 17.5 houses to the acre. The authorities are determined that the plan must be made to work, in spite of high unemployment, low wages, and London prices in the shops. In fact, even more houses are being built, although 80 of these, worth $750,000, stand empty, and 24 more are let to the United States Air Force.
Right, action.
A hired camera team making a pat-on-the-back documentary for the planners film a London family on the day they moved into their new house in Haverhill.
Right, cut it there, please. So what do you want to do now?
Ian, would you get round for some sound as they got to the door, please?
The newcomers joined in the spirit of the documentary, which the authority who pay for the crew are determined shall illustrate optimism in the future, good fortune at getting a house in Haverhill. But who are the planners responsible for this expanding town? The LCC, now the Greater London Council, financed it to get rid of overspill. The local council, mostly shopkeepers, employers, and a couple of idealists, administer the place supported by the West Suffolk County Council. John and Pat Ellum and their 3 children have lived 4 years in Haverhill. In London, he earned £25 a week. Here, as a skilled machine operator, he earns 16. Does Haverhill offer his family a better future?
I can't, at the moment, see any future at all. I can't see more than a week or 2 weeks ahead at any time, because I don't think things are run down here properly, you know. People on the council down there don't seem to have any idea, and they don't consider your future at all. I can't see any. Certainly not for me children.
When you say that you can't see more than a week or a fortnight ahead, do you mean that you're anxious about losing your job at any moment?
No, I won't say about losing my job, but it's just I don't consider my future my job, you see. I consider my future what the way my family is happy, you know. This is the future. I don't think the future is your job. I think you can always find another job, but it's what is provided for your family in the social activities and things like this that you think of, not the job.
Mrs. Ellum, what do you think about the future from the point of view not so much of your husband's job, but as he's speaking as sort of the good life for the family?
None whatsoever. I don't think there's any future for the children as far as careers are concerned. I've got 2 sons, you see. And I mean, what are they going to do when they leave school? Just work in a factory, which I don't want for them. I want them to do something worthwhile, which most mothers do. But down here, there's absolutely nothing. I mean, a friend of mine, 2 of her children have had to go back to London to take up careers. Well, I don't want this. I mean, we moved here for the children, originally, as well as the house. And then if they're going to grow up and leave us, well, what is the point in living here at all?
But you speak almost as though you felt that this town was going to die instead of develop and grow.
What do you mean going to die? It's dead. This town is dead.
It just stands still. It doesn't...
We haven't got the right people to run this town, I don't think.
See, they've put the houses here, but they haven't planned for the population that will come with it. You see what I mean?
One of the interesting things about this town is, in fact, that it didn't grow up in a sort of haphazard way like all the other older towns that we're accustomed to living in. I mean, this was planned from the ground up. In fact, it's received prizes for the quality of its planning.
What, you mean the way it's laid out, the estate itself?
I mean, it was planned for people from the first brick, wasn't it?
It wasn't planned for people with children. Not with all these steps.
No, definitely not.
Women with young children, or pushing a pram that's expecting another child. How on earth is she expected to get up and down those steps? It's ridiculous. And it's not just one lot of steps, you've got to go 3 or 4. If you live right at the top of the estate, well, I wouldn't like to be expecting in this place, quite honestly, and pushing a pram. It must be absolute agony.
Well, what's in your view? What's your opinion of the planning that went into it? I mean, the architects were very pleased with it.
Well, it's a comedy playhouse, isn't it, I think. It's ridiculous.
It might look nice, but it the planners, but it just doesn't work out in theory.
Do you think it looks nice?
No, I don't, but you say that...
What do you think it looks like?
I think it looks like barracks.
What do you see as a solution to this problem? I mean, where the majority of people just don't connect with the council that's supposed to look after their interests?
Well, I can't... The only solution I see is all those that's on the council to resign and let, you know, someone else have a go.
Don't you elect them?
We elect them, yes.
Well, why do you go on electing them if you're unsatisfied with them?
But up here on the estate, we've got no control on these other smaller wards, you see. We can elect who we want for this ward, which we have done. We've got 2 Londoners, you see. But we can't control the town because it's split up into wards, you see. And I mean, you've got a lot of local people that living down here.
So most of the councillors are shopkeepers, and they're so busy with their shops, I don't think they've got the time to worry about us.
Although cleverly designed to separate traffic and pedestrians, this estate has become a nightmare milk ground for John Walden, who must leave his float to walk for miles. And he works a 7-day week because nobody else will do the job. He's another Londoner who'd quit these barracks if he could. 2 London families. On the left, the Seeleys. He's out of work and has 4 children. And the Stalleys. They left a good house and a steady job for their children's sake. But he feels the council might have warned him about unemployment in Haverhill.
Well, knowing full well that I was giving up a good job, giving up council property, knowing I wasn't coming out of rooms, surely they could have wrote and told me that things are not so good down here. I mean, after all, when I exchanged down here with another person, I put on my form the reasons for me moving down here.
Which were what?
Health reasons, and to give my family a fresh start. And that's why I come down here.
What exactly did you have in mind when you said a fresh start?
Well, a fresh start all round. Fresh house, fresh job, a good life for the kids, country. I mean, everybody says country living is clean and good. This is what I thought.
The people who are in favour of this new town and expanding it still further say that everything depends on industry coming here.
That is the point. The industry is all right, but what I mean by industry, tuck-me acne firms and the majority of them. I mean, say the majority of these are only small firms. I mean, say you get 4 firms, you can more or less put them in Briggs's canteen. That is it.
I mean, you won't like to afford to.
But that's it. I mean,
it's going to take away. I mean, they're saying that the unemployment is going to be bad this year. The unemployment in Haverhill is already bad. So bring a big firm down here. Someone employing 300-400 people. There's enough people down here.
Why do you think the big firms haven't come?
I don't know. There's rumours.
There's rumours.
But you can't say, well, I can't say too much about it because there's no definite proof. And so you just listen to the gossip and you sort of wonder all the time.
Mrs. Seeley, do you think that you who are discontented are in the minority here, or do you think that most people are finding it difficult settling here?
I think most people are, definitely.
If that's the case, why don't more of them speak up?
Well, perhaps they don't like hearing their views very lightly. Or perhaps they're afraid, I don't know. I don't know how this council will react to this, do I?
But you must think yourself, now this programme that's come down here, this has been on my mind all day, and ever since I spoke to one of your men the other night, at the back of my mind has been one thing. Is this going to cost me my job? Is it going to cause me to be disliked in Haverhill? Well, I don't know. If that's the case, well, it's hard luck now. Because I think I'm old enough to stand on my own 2 feet. I've run no neighbours down. Got no reason to. I've got good neighbours. But the work situation, Come on. Is it going to cost anybody their job? That remains to be seen.
A drop in wages, if not the sack for speaking up, is to be feared among these new homes. In London, the Haywards lived in 2 rooms on £26 a week. Here they've a house, but he's lost his job. Was the move here a sensible decision?
No, definitely not. I wouldn't, if I had my chance all over again, I think I'd stick in 2 rooms. I would, you know, because eventually things would work out in London. I would get accommodation, I suppose.
From the point of view of the children, though, there must be some compensation. After all, here they are in the middle of the country instead of in the middle of...
You're kidding, there's no compensation down here for the kids. I mean, they're no better off here than they were in London. I think we've had them more sick down here than what we did in London. I mean, and the poor little devils, they're stuck in these courtyards. And, well, just dodging amongst the doggies' calling cards, and that's all. I mean, there's not much. I mean, they're always coming in with a mess on them.
What about the countryside around about?
No, it's all agriculture. It's all potatoes and corn and things like that. I mean, there's no grazing fields like I remember when I was a kid in the country. We could play in the meadows and that, but you can't here.
What do you think of the house itself?
I love the house inside.
And the setting and its surroundings?
Horrible. I mean, it's too close. You know, it gives you claustrophobia. And it's, well, as I say, it's a concrete jungle. I mean, it's not all that pretty. I mean, it's pretty ugly, I think.
What do you think about it, Mrs. Hayward?
Oh, I think they've built them much too close. Definitely. I mean, I know we took them without a front garden and that. I mean, we walked in the front door and looked at it from inside. We didn't think about the outside, and my first impression was, oh, it's nice and safe for the children. But when you've been here a while and that, and I'll admit it's safe, to the extent, apart from the steps, of course, you're frightened to let them out too young because there's steps everywhere you look. You have to get, you're going up and up and up. They've just got this front bit to play out on. I mean, there's no grass surrounding us. Some courts have got grass in them, I'll admit, but ours isn't. I mean, if ever we go to London and we come back up that Greenfields Way and we say, here we go, we're entering the prison again,
yeah,
and it feels, once you're back into the prison, and, well, I think it's harder to get out of this prison than it is one of the large major security.
Well, you know you'll come out of them eventually then.
You know you're going to get out eventually, but here, you know, I mean, we've tried so hard.
You seem to have come to the conclusion that a house that's big enough isn't perhaps the most important thing of all.
Oh, no, definitely not. It was before we came down here. It was the ultimate. I mean, that is what we wanted, and when we got it, we realised it's
What is
not
the most
everything.
important thing to you?
Well, secure job and good money.
Do you agree, Mrs. Hayward, with your husband that the house is not perhaps the most important thing of all?
It's definitely not the most important.
A West Suffolk pub jammed with resettled Londoners in Haverhill, where the planners propose packing 26,000 city people into a country town.
That's like I said earlier on. That's all right. They keep shoving houses up, building them up, estate after estate, but there's no employment, there's no entertainment, there's no nothing. Hold on there, hold on.
It was all wrong, wasn't it? It was all wrong.
Excuse me. How do you like living on this estate? You don't fancy it, no. Why not?
Well, maybe it's because I'm a Londoner, like, you know.
Have you ever tried to protest about the circumstances?
Yeah, all of us.
Where?
The other night, they opened a social up over the other side of the road here, and they had Eldon Griffiths there, the MP. He got up on the stage and we tried to ask him questions. And his answer was, if that young man over there would like to be quiet so as I could speak, and we was all out on our ear holes, slung out.
What happened to you?
What did I do? What did I do? There's 5 of us here. What did I do? Well, you tell me. He said, if those young men over there would like to let me answer questions, he said, I'll get on it. So I sort of bowed to him and let him get on with it, like, you know. He still didn't say nothing about the town.
What questions did you put to him?
We put him, why are we so low wages?
And that was the main question.
It's the main question.
And what kind of an answer did you get?
No question, we got thrown out.
We got no answer. We didn't get any reply whatsoever.
We was out. We got thrown out. We was asked to leave.
Do you think he knew the answer?
No. He didn't know the answer.
What is the answer?
Because there's all these locals here. They're blocking our wages.
Oh, no,
It is. Right, all right, not locals, not locals. Not locals, but the main firms in this town There's a little circle. circle, which is called the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce. And out of that, you've got Gurteens, you've got Joe Smith, chairman in chief. Right. Joe Smith is the fellow that put the wages where they are now. Joe Smith. You've got Bright. Joe Smith stuck the wages where they are now. Right. Who else? Mickey, come, Mickey, you know this. Mickey.
Paul, R.C. Paul.
R.C. Paul. Who else? What's our wages?
Gurteen.
Gurteen, have you got there?
Gurteen's the biggest crook in the
Well,
world.
Gurteen is the judge. Gurteen, Paul.
He's also the judge of this place,
Right.
Gurteen.
What have they done? Now, what have they done? Listen, to what truth, I get £12.5 on a dole and offer me £11 a week for a job. Would you take?
The Conservative MP for Bury St Edmunds, Eldon Griffiths, admits Haverhill is the problem town of his constituency, lacking in adequate public transport, hospital services, social cohesion or direction in the community. He knows, too, that the lifeblood of this new community is new industry, and that it isn't coming in fast enough. But would he have considered Haverhill an ideal site for an expanding town in the first place?
No, I would not. To be a success, an expanding town has got to have a flourishing industrial base. It's got to have raw materials, transport, a labour force and a good market for its products. Now, Haverhill is not fortunate in any of those things. Our transport is limited. We don't have a substantial market in the area. On the contrary, this area of Suffolk is comparatively short of industry. I don't think any effective survey was done at the time to see whether or not it was a natural place for organic industrial growth. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why Haverhill has a problem. But I think that it's a problem that can be licked.
Do you think that the people who took the decisions, not on behalf of the LCC as it then was, now the GLC, but on behalf of Haverhill to expand like this, were competent at that time to take these decisions?
Well, by their fruits shall ye know them. The town cannot be described as a howling success. To that extent, it is possible, retrospectively, to criticise those who made the decisions.
Do you think that the local planners knew what they were taking on when they decided to accept this grant and undertake this very big project?
What I think is a real problem is that Haverhill originally was a small country town of some 4,000 people, and almost overnight it had to take on what is, after all, a massive piece of social engineering. To build a town with all that that involves, of some 30,000, is a tremendous task to impose upon those who were the leaders of a small town.
Councillor Horace Eaves, elected in 1961, has been a pro-expansionist all along. Born and bred in Haverhill, like his father and grandfather before him, he was a railwayman until he lost his job when Dr. Beeching closed the line. Haverhill has such poor communications with the outside world, he nurses dreams of reopening it. Council chairman last year, now vice chairman, he's prepared to admit the planners blundered here and there, particularly over the high density of houses per acre.
There tends to be overcrowding. But having said that, I am satisfied that in the years, a few years hence, the Clements neighbourhood, as we know it today, will be transformed.
By what?
By what we are trying to achieve in tree planting and landscaping.
What's the maximum number of trees you hope to plant there in the next...
Well, it's unlimited. We will go on planting until we are satisfied that we've created the environment which we want to create.
Which will be what? It'll be a sort of a concrete jungle covered in greenery?
Well, no, it's not a concrete jungle. You see, these are first-class houses.
I think everybody agrees with that. It's the tremendous density of them, the closeness of them.
I've said this, you see, that I think this was one of the errors. But of course, force of circumstances the cost of land allied to the cost of building.
Expensive mistake.
But it was the only one. You see, this was the only way that the estate could be developed because of its contours.
I believe somebody got a prize for it, didn't they?
Well, indeed they did. You see, this was in one of the earlier stages a prize for high-density building.
Now, do you honestly feel
this was a national award?
Do you honestly feel that award was justified, or do you think that?
Oh, indeed I do.
You do?
Oh, indeed I do.
You don't think a dunce's cap would have been more suitable than that?
No. I think this is justified and deserved.
Pictures of the English countryside before the planners appeared on the scene decorate the sitting room walls of the richest family and biggest employers in Haverhill. They've been cloth weavers by trade for over 2 centuries. The present head of the family, Bill Gurteen, understands from an industrialist's point of view the counter-attractions of other development areas.
Quite obviously, you have specialized areas such as your northwest, your Wales, and various other places which the government are paying high subsidies for people to go in there. And frankly, for one, if you ask me to come down here, I'd think very, very considerably. And the only real thing that I can see is advantageous for people coming into Haverhill, that it does happen to be only 50-odd miles from London, and again you've got a very easy access to the Harwich and Felixstowe Ipswich ports, which of course, if we ever went into the common market, is ideal. But for people to come down here when you can be paid a considerable amount to go elsewhere, I think it's ridiculous.
Would you, as a manufacturer who's established here, think of uprooting and perhaps moving your factories to a development area?
I have very seriously considered this, and I am still considering it. And I mean, I'll be perfectly honest with you, that in the not-too-distant future, it may be necessary for me to build a factory where I get these facilities. And in fact, I think we probably shall do.
Well, if this development, this enormous expansion, lives or dies according to whether or not industry comes here, isn't it a little bit lunatic to go on building, in your opinion, more houses for more people?
I have said this for a long, long time, and I still believe it. And I can't answer this question because I believe that the planners will tell you that once the momentum has started, that it's very difficult to stop. But to keep on putting houses up at the rate they are now with the hopes of industry coming down, or with industry being built down here with the hopes that they're going to have the people to feel the houses, to my mind, it's slightly ludicrous and a little bit of rather bad thinking.
The face of Haverhill has been changed beyond recognition. There's no going back now, unless you leave us areas of falling, sort of deserted slums around these hills.
True.
Who's benefited?
That's a very, very difficult question. I can assure you, for one, that the industrialists in the town haven't benefited. In fact, they've very much the reverse. I can't think that the whole of the community in Haverhill itself has really benefited. I notice that we have got considerably larger council offices, and therefore the more you have, the more you've got to put into the council offices to be able to help those people that are suffering in the streets, etc. I'm afraid I shall have to leave you to draw your own conclusions on this, Mr. Henley, but I can't see really who has benefited, or who will.
Let us now hear the thoughts of Sir Eldon, Chris Gurteen and Adrian Graves on this early phase of the expansion programme.
London was prepared to build the houses, of course, and in that sense to remove its obligations to those who left London and came to Haverhill, but it really didn't have any budget and certainly no expenditure on the social infrastructure, and by that I mean improving the roads, improving things like doctors' surgeries, all the other things that you need to undergird a new town. And so that was not done. The schools were inadequate. There was very poor access to any kind of medical support. I think the imbalance between numbers of people building up very fast and the employment not building anywhere near as rapidly, and the infrastructure, social infrastructure, lagging far behind. And those three things need to be pulled together, and they were not.
One of the bad things they did was when they made Haverhill an overswell town, what they should have done is they should have looked at this site. It's the ideal place to have the heart of the town. They could then have used this site to develop the centre of Haverhill. What they never did is never put in the infrastructure to get traffic to flow into the town.
When any of these major projects and experiments, and this was, after all, a huge experiment in social engineering, when these projects happen, you have to put the infrastructure, the amenities, the basic support systems in place first. In Haverhill, there was a rush to build residential concrete and bring people here before the essential infrastructure, amenities, entertainment and support systems were in place. That's where the problem came. At the time that the commitment to overspill was made, and Haverhill's population was going to change exponentially, just a year after that, they closed the railway line and they then declassified the A604. Now, there is an argument that says at the stage where the key arteries to this town were effectively cut, maybe the council should have said, hold on a minute, that has to cap what we can accept as reasonable development.
We will now begin our Repost, starting by travelling forward 42 years to 2010 to see just how much has changed since 1968. When we arrive at 2010, Gary will be ready to take us on our journey.
Manchester United win European Cup. First man on the moon. Oil discovered in North Sea. Britain goes decimal. Miners' strike leads a 3-day week. Princess Anne marries Mark Phillips. Lord Lucan goes missing. Vietnam War ends. Worst drought ever in UK. Elvis dies. First ever mobile phone. Maggie wins Tory leadership. John Lennon killed. Charles and Diana marry. Falklands War won. Maggie wins landside victory. Miners strike again. Live Aid concert. Andrew and Fergie marry. Hurricane hits UK. Pound note abolished. Tiananmen Square. Channel Tunnel meets in the middle. Freddie Mercury dies. Andy and Fergie separate. Dyson's first vacuum cleaner. Mandela becomes President of South Africa. Hunting abolished in UK. Dolly the sheep cloned. Diana dies. Angel of the North built. WI launches Calendar Girls. Concorde crashes. Twin Towers attacked. Queen Mother dies. Concorde's final flight. Queen Mary II launched. Charles and Camilla marry. Saddam Hussein executed. New Wembley Stadium opened. Barack Obama elected. Wogan leaves BBC. Iron Age sites uncovered.
Here is the gateway roundabout to Haverhill with its spirit of enterprise, and our southern bypass behind me, which was built in 1993 and perhaps one of the most high-profile improvements not foreseen in 1968. The town is just a short distance down that way, and today join me and I'll take you on a journey through Haverhill and we'll explore together just how much it has changed since those bleak images of 1968. Here we are at the start of the town. This is not the original sign you saw in the BBC programme, it's been replaced with this. The original proclaimed, "Welcome to Haverhill, pioneers in town expansion." And in that declaration, I believe we can detect the root of so much disappointment felt by many of those who came here. The town council saw themselves as pioneers, pushing back the boundaries, whereas the new people simply wanted a new home, a new job, and fresh beginnings. They never expected to be pioneers, taking part in a major piece of social engineering. Join me now as we go and visit the Clements estate, which was treated very harshly in the original documentary. For many of the people that come up from London, the Clements estate was to be their new home. It was the second major estate to be built, the Parkway being the first. It took a very long time for the genuine failings of this estate to be recognised by the borough and town council. But I believe this estate epitomises just what Haverhill has done in the last 50 years. Look around you now and see how different things are today from 1968. Many tenants have taken up the option to buy, so what does that tell you? The Clements has gone from strength from being one of the bleakest areas now to providing a successful environment for its families, and all done by the tenacity of its people, the determination of the town council and the support of the borough. It's surely a metaphor for the whole town rising above the failings and challenges to become what it is today. When we posted the original programme on YouTube, we never expected the responses this would bring. We never asked or encouraged for any feedback. So imagine our surprise at the level of the contacts, most of which were very critical of the original programme and told us of how successful their home move to Haverhill has been. I will share with you one about living here on the Clements. Here are some comments about the Clements received by Rachel and Mick. I'd like to speak on behalf of my dad. He came down here in 1966. He was a key worker. He lived in a hut on the Burton's bus site for 6 months before being offered a house on the Clements. He could only have this house if he was married. Mum and Dad had to get married in 6 weeks flat. How things have changed. My mum still's in the same house. Me and my brother had a good childhood. We go back to London to see the family, and we're glad we chose Haverhill. My parents never moved out of their house on the Clements because it was better than a tower block in London. For someone who grew up on the Clements and is proud of it. Rachel. Well, I hope you all now agree that Horace Eves was right. The Clements has been transformed, and all of those who could see no future here were well and truly wrong. A serious omission from the 1968 programme was the lack of commitment about the areas of Haverhill, in particular the Parkway estate, which was the first to be built, and I'm going to take you there now. Here we are beside one of the main roads into the Parkway estate. You can immediately see how different it is from the Clements. The LCC created what I think is an excellent estate here. Good sized gardens at both rear and, more importantly, at the front of the homes. It has to be said though that even this estate suffered from its problems during its infancy. However, I do feel it's rather poignant that the 1968 programme ignored the development entirely. One wonders why. No tenants were spoken to.
All these estates seem to have matured into first-class environments with a high uptake right to buy. They are now stable and successful with, as we have heard, some families living there continuously from the earliest days.
We would say it is to the credit of our town that these estates can hold their own with many of the private developments that abound. Yes, in 1968 there were problems with Haverhill's estates, but look at them now.
We can be rightly proud of how they are. And we don't think anyone could say that Haverhill's homes lack warmth and dignity.
No. A topic mentioned quite forcefully in 1968 was the lack of anything to do. No entertainment, don't mention the treacle parties, and nowhere to go.
Of all the complaints made then, this one is today perhaps the easiest to shoot down. Hold on tight as Gary takes you on a whistle-stop ride past a few of the venues open to Haverhill people today. Over to you, Gary.
Haverhill Cricket Club, Haverhill Bowls Club, Haverhill Snooker and Bowl, East Town Park, Haverhill Golf Club, Haverhill Rovers, Haverhill Rugby Club, Haverhill Ex-Servicemen's Club, Miss Haverhill Leisure Centre, Subway, Prezzo's, Frankie and Benny's, Cineworld, Haverhill Arts Centre.
Need we say any more? And this is a list of just what the crew thought up in 5 minutes.
And I know I didn't include loads of the clubs and organisations that the town supports.
And there is now no shortage of somewhere to go and something to do. Perhaps the hardest problem to solve back in 1968 was that of employment. But again, on this issue, as with others, we can show that despite the lack of vision back then, we have made enormous improvements.
That's not to say we've not had our share of failures and struggles, but so has much of the country over the past years, which only serves to make our development all the more worthy of credit.
Let's look at some of the recent arrivals who, by investing their money, time and effort here, have helped maintain our development and expansion. Over to you, Gary.
Why did Tesco come here, we ask ourselves? They came here because they saw a future in Haverhill, and a future in investment, and a future in our town. W.H. Smith's, Costa, Iceland's, Kalina, Harvester, Days Inn, Percy Dalton, HID.
It is very encouraging to see such support for Haverhill from companies and businesses that have let their investment cash do the talking. But Haverhill's rise from the gloom in 1968 is not just down to the new arrivals. Over the years, many firms have prospered and become entwined in the fabric of our town, providing generations of people with employment over many years. Let us now say how much we appreciate them and mention some of them. Over to you, Gary, to show us whom we are thinking of.
Ardex, Marchant, DB Sheet Metal, Taylor's Foundry, Person and Son, Mansell's, Genzymes, GMC, Herbert's, IFF, Gurteen's.
We should also recognise the input that some of our long-running retail outlets have made, some of which have spanned this entire expansion programme. Over to you, Gary, to show us whom we are talking about.
Morley's, Chapman's and Martin's, Griffiths Jones, Benny's.
What we feel especially encouraging is that we are still pushing Haverhill onwards and upwards, with new developments being planned. Over to you, Gary, to show us what is expected into the future.
And here we have the possible site of our northern bypass. Hamlet Green Retail Park. The New Catholic Church. Here is the site of Nick Rumsey's new research park, which will present a prestigious entry to Haverhill and hopefully include elements of our local universities. It will promote a large number of high calibre jobs and help keep more of our population working here in the town and slow down the exodus to Cambridge and Bury.
Let's now hear from Sir Eldon, Chris, Adrian, and this time also Nick Rumsey, who is the town's major developer. They'll say how they feel about Haverhill today.
It's a vibrant community, and I think the balance of home ownership and municipal housing and the influx of jobs and industry has made it into a pretty good community. There's obviously things still needing to be done, but I would say if you can measure happiness, which is an impossible task, but if you can measure happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, when I first knew Haverhill, I wouldn't have put it higher than 2 or 3, and now I'd put it between 7 and 8.
I actually don't think we'd have got to where we are today if this hadn't happened. I think it's very good. I think that the Cineworld development is very good. The sports facilities are excellent. Cricket pitch, the football pitch with the new football stadium we've got in the town. The Arts Centre. As you come into Haverhill and you've got the spirit of enterprise, I think that's attractive. The Northwest Haverhill development, and if that goes ahead, which I think it will, I mean that would be terrific for the town. And then we're now looking at the Hanshet End development. We're looking at a possible further development on the Wilsey estate. No, I think really the sky's the limit.
I think that Haverhill has recovered remarkably well from a bad start. It has some good schools. I think if my father died in 1997, were he here now, I think he would be relieved to see some of the developments that have happened in the decade since he died. There have been some very key critical changes for the better. Were they to make the same Man Alive programme today, they would find it very difficult to present the same negative level of the original film.
I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised by the strength of the manufacturing sector, by the can-do, pioneering attitude of the people that lived here that I dealt with, or the business community that I was encountering. It seemed 10 years ago to be a town that was lacking in certain facilities, but what it had, which I've never encountered anywhere, certainly in the southeast at least, though, was a community of business people and others that were all prepared to go that extra mile to try to get the things that were missing. I've seen a growth in confidence among the business community. I mean, things have moved forward, new companies have come to the town, new facilities have been developed, the cinema, the Arts Centre, the new revamped leisure centre, things like that, football club moving. A lot of things have happened to improve the communal facilities available to the town. It becomes a bit circular, I think. You know, the confidence grows, everything feeds on each other. I mean, just the opening of this hotel, the opening of the new pub, everything that happens is a new event, everyone's excited about it, everyone participates. So the level of self-confidence within the town and the community generally has grown considerably, I would say. And that sort of had a sort of this sort of ripple effect. When I first got involved in this town, having been involved in Cambridge for a long time, a lot of property agents said to me, well, why have you gone to Haverhill? And those same agents now will be saying to me, we're trying to do things in Haverhill. And I was hugely impressed. Say that, you know, in the same way that the property industry locally has sort of recognised the positives in the town, so an increasing number of businessmen from outside do as well. I mean, I guess that's reflected by some of our activities in that people on this development have come. There are several occupiers who have come from outside town. I think a lot of the companies I talk to aren't even aware of the historic reputation of Haverhill. And I think we have got to the point now where it's not really an issue. It's probably more of an issue in the minds of people who have been here for a while. I actually think the community here, and I genuinely believe this, that the local politicians here have done quite a good job in bringing this town on to where it is, and I think have quite a sensible vision for where it can go in the future. And I pretty much buy into what they're trying to do. I mean, the population of Haverhill, I think, is currently about 22,500 people. It still suffers from, it doesn't have a decent retail offer yet in the high street, although it's getting a few of the multiples on the outskirts. In order to get the national retailers wanting to come here and to prevent people going to Cambridge or Bury or otherwise to do their shopping, the immediate population needs to get to at least 25,000. The projected, I think the projected population with the development that's anticipated in the northeast and the northwest of Haverhill, I think will take the population over a period of time to about 30,000, which gives the town a real critical mass, which I think will really, really help it in terms of bringing those people to, well, those companies to the town, which in turn will improve the offer, which in turn will attract more people to the town. The high street is not the prettiest, but it's based on fairly historic layouts. You have the Gurteen's building, which is of its kind, quite an attractive building. To my mind, the best thing the council could do to consolidate the town centre would be to look at demolishing Gurteen's altogether, or at least removing pretty much everything apart from that Gothic facade that everyone likes so much, which allows then the 3.5 acre site immediately adjacent to the high street to be developed with footprints of buildings that the 21st century retailer requires. I've got the Haverhill Research Park, which we've just got the master plan approved yesterday, and which I hope to take forward so that we can develop that out in the next couple of years, which will bring, one hopes, a few thousand jobs to the town over a decent period of time. During the period of time that I've been here, I've seen the offer of the town to its community improve dramatically. I see that improving still further in a variety of ways.
Who's benefited? I can't see really who has benefited, or who will.
I would argue completely the opposite. And I would have thought if you lived here, you should be fairly happy with the way things are going.
I believe we have shown that the bleak future they foresaw back in 1968 has not come to pass. Indeed, we have shown that we have succeeded beyond their wildest dreams.
We note in particular Nick's comments about us approaching the watershed of 25,000 population, when he's confident the large retail outlets will be interested in our retail footprint, which, if the development of the Gurteen site were to go ahead, would provide the town with the shopping scene it requires.
One wonders, if this were all to come about, would that at last be the end of the story? Anyway, we are now confident we have proven our riposte. Well, here we are at the conclusion of our film. We'd like to remind you of our purpose with this.
We never disputed a great deal of what was said in the original programme. Our interviews support this view that yes, Haverhill had many problems, most of which would seem to have been fuelled by infrastructure failings and shortcomings.
What we took issue with this was the bleak future that was painted. Today we have shown that those bleak views have been proven to be ill-founded.
For too long, Haverhill has laboured under its unfair reputation of being a troubled town with poor social direction, poor housing and an us and them mentality as portrayed in 1968.
Now is the time to lay those particular ghosts to rest. What we have today is a vibrant, expanding town where people of many origins are living happily together and seeing at last the benefits of 50 years of town expansion.
For those of us that have lived through it, it's been one hell of a journey, a road lit with hopes, aspirations, disappointments, but always pushing onwards, striving for better. We truly are and were pioneers in town expansion, and we have succeeded.
We now leave you with some sweeping views of Haverhill, and hope that, as you leave us, you do so feeling that we have shown our town to your satisfaction.
The Haverhillmanalive project was established to set the record straight. It wanted to address the issues raised in a BBC programme in 1968, which was hypercritical of the town, its expansion, its community, its planners and its facilities. Hopefully now you've had an opportunity to see both the films, both the original and the 2 years in the making new version of Haverhillmanalive by the project team. Hopefully you will have been able to make up your own mind that far from being doomed to failure as it was in the original BBC film, Haverhill has recovered well and has grown to be a successful, dynamic and future-looking community. Now, here we go in 2012, Haverhill is moving on to the next stage of its development and future, with the publication of St Edmundsbury Borough Council's Vision 2031 strategy. Within that, Haverhill will grow again, probably to a town of over 30,000. Originally, when the overspill scheme started, Haverhill was a small town of only 4,500 people. Under expansion, it moved forward to where it is today, about 23,500. Once it turns the 30,000 threshold, it will be a completely different critical mass. It will have a stronger economy. It will have the opportunity for a much more booming and developing retail sector. Its housing has moved on too, with a balance between public sector and private sector housing, and jobs and skills, just as Haverhill actually always had. Strong schools, a strong skill base and a strong community. And actually, despite the economic downturns that we've experienced in the meantime, Haverhill has continued to prosper, and it is now lining up to prosper for the future. A lot of food for thought. And so may I, without any further ado, ask Sir Eldon to say a few words. Will you please welcome Sir Eldon Griffiths.
At my age and stage, the story of man alive is a challenge. I am still alive and intend to go on for at least a few years yet. What we've been seeing is the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think I was in, if not at the start, nearly at the start, and Haverhill, frankly, was in its earliest stages a mess. It was over-ambitious to be plonking down all these new houses in what often was just muddy hillsides and decanting people out of London who expected the best and found something less than that. I remember going around all those rows of houses on the Connaught areas in Chalkstone, in Parkway, and being frankly appalled by the lack of paths so that women would be pushing their perambulators up the hill in mud. And I was appalled too by the fact that people had come here with high hopes, nice houses, but no jobs. And then there was the period of the empties, when all these houses had been put up, very often without any facilities, and there was nobody in them. And at one stage we went to the United States Air Force and asked them to occupy 50 or 60, and they did. But it was absurd that on the hillsides of Haverhill we had these empty houses while people elsewhere were looking for homes. So in those scenes that you saw in the pub, the complaints were not unjustified, except one. but I won't mention that. I preferred the Rose and Crown in those days, but I sank my pints along with the rest. But in a word, Haverhill was a mess, but there's not much point now in digging around why it happened. The London Architects Department of the GLC, they were determined to do it their way. They didn't want particularly to listen to what anybody locally had to say, and so there was imbalance. There was houses, there wasn't any jobs. There were people, there wasn't any facilities. And that meant for many young families disappointment. But Haverhill has turned the corner, and it was always going to, because of one thing, and that was the people. The people of Suffolk who found the overspill hard to take for a while, and there were certainly some differences between the locals and the Londoners. There was Newtown blues among many of the wives of the young men who'd come here. They didn't know what to do, they didn't know where to go to. But it has happened, and like so many things in England, that which started off badly is doing very much better now. And so I always had deep down a faith in Haverhill, because I have a faith in England and its people. And it was the children growing up here who did eventually have better schools and who did eventually have better jobs to go to. So Haverhill, as the films demonstrate, had a difficult start, but it's overcome its initial problems, and that's very much down to you. And I honour and thank you for it. Just one word about the future. Haverhill can't prosper if Britain doesn't prosper, and we are as a country going through difficult times. But one area where I think Haverhill has special advantages, arising from its proximity to the great University of Cambridge, is in the health sciences. A lot of people from Haverhill now already work at Papworth and at Addenbrooke's, I think that's correct. But Haverhill's got a background in the health sciences, which I think is going to stand it well into the future. And so I would like to see as much development as possible in the biosciences, in all the things that turn around health. And the last thing I'd like to say is that St Edmundsbury Council, since it was created, and for one of my sins as a local government minister, I did in fact create St Edmundsbury Council by putting together Haverhill and Clare and Bury St Edmunds all into one new community. Originally, the then council couldn't handle the social engineering of Haverhill. But St Edmundsbury now is doing its best. And I'm very glad that one of those who's leading the charge is my son. And John is leading that charge as leader of the St Edmundsbury Council, in part because in my early days, when I was canvassing on these then bleak estates, he used to canvass with me. He was then a young student at Cambridge, and he was in and out of all of the Haverhill homes at that time. And I think he learned then that Haverhill was a challenge, and that once it was in St Edmundsbury, then St Edmundsbury must do more for Haverhill. And I think it is doing that. So the health science is a part of the future, and the other thing is to improve that road. I used to drive up that road regularly, and it's not a lot better now than it was then. It's a little better, and I missed one great opportunity. When the prison was expanded, we should have taken the road straight across the fields to the western side and not allowed that enormous bend around the prison. That wasn't the way to go. We could have done it, County Council should have done it. One day it will have to be done. But a decent road from Haverhill up to Bury is, in my view, essential for its future. Let me return as I began. Haverhill had a bad, bad patch. Haverhill is now on the move. I think the future is going to be better than the past, and I hope to live a little bit longer to see that happen. Thank you, and congratulations to those who've made this marvellous film.